Hi and welcome to World of WATSORB's Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake comparison and review, in the final video of the series for now anyway. I'm delighted to have made it this far and gotten to the end of what was planned despite some alterations to this last section. And we pick up in the original game as we hear the arrival of President Shinra's son Rufus, but in the remake we've still got to say goodbye to Sephiroth, who we've just saw murder the President, and shockingly it would seem Barret. As we look on in shock, we see what appears to be Sephiroth rise with what's left of the body of Jenova, and the floating movement does echo movements we saw from him in the original game at later points. But one of the spectres has brought Barret back from the dead, it would seem.
Don't think so.
This death was not the one ordained for you by fate.
Red 13 confirms the role of these wraiths as being somebody who it seemed would be protecting the fate we know as the original plot from Final Fantasy VII. It's odd to see and this is the only time so far we have seen one of these spectres or arbiters of fate having broken off on its own to carry an action out. Given the livestream energy we saw emanate from it last time, my wondering was perhaps if the arbiters are perhaps the physical embodiment of those who have passed or returned to the planet, or perhaps stuck in some kind of purgatory. But Cloud isn't finished with Sephiroth just yet, but as he makes to climb after his former mentor, the arbiters of fate have other ideas and converge upon the scene to show Cloud the truth of the situation. It's not Sephiroth, but merely his image has been projected upon the robed reunion figure who we met in Sector 6, meaning as he leaps off with Jenova's remains and sticks Cloud with an unnerving stare, we've now seen him and Marco number 49 from Sector 7 be utilised as pawns for Jenova. While they still linger, the Arbiters of Fate have not grouped again and seem content to let this moment play out as per the original game.
About time we made our escape too.
It's not only the Arbiters who are keeping things the same, as the new Shinra President, Rufus, comes to the roof area in his helicopter, which is flown by the Turks Rud and Reno, takes out the avalanche chopper which was coming to save us, and comes in to land.
Sure you want to do this personally, boss?
We get our first glimpse of Rufus in the remake, and I must say I was a little surprised to see how light his blonde hair was, as in the original it certainly seemed darker and almost reddish, as you'll see.
If it ain't Rufus Shinra, heir to the throne himself.
Yep.
In the original we come straight out to our meeting with Rufus, and in both games the conversation covers similar ground. Palmer here informs Rufus of Sephiroth's presence and his father's death, and we then see our group introduce themselves in a fashion that we do see repeated later on in the remake, but elsewhere. Rufus seems to show a real disinterest in our group, indeed only engaging with Cloud in battle once his hand is forced later, and the loss of his father doesn't appear to bother him too much, as he seems to have his own plans for how Shinra are now going to proceed under his care. And as you'll see with Cloud's hair being blonde, I did, kind of maybe take Rufus's to be perhaps red, ginger, but nah, no matter. But Rufus isn't interested in throwing money at the situation, and he unveils his plans which indicate that Shinra may be even more loathsome under his leadership. and we see how that plays out later in the story, and again, it'll be interesting to see how their later involvement is portrayed in the remake. Cloud though, he wants to take Rufus down now, and in both games urges Barret to take the others to safety. And also in both games, Tifa remains back at a kind of halfway point between Cloud and the other group.
Stop.
The hell I will. We can finish off the family here and now.
Take Aerith and get out of here. I'll buy you guys some time.
I can stay here. Back you up.
Barret, I'm asking you. Please.
Fine. Have it your way then. But you better be right behind us.
You're a soldier, aren't you? Which, of course, would mean that I own you.
Ex-soldier. I quit.
Secure the others.
So while Rufus believes that we are a member of Soldier, Cloud's quick to rebuff this, and in both games we fall into a battle with a reluctant Rufus and his guard dog, Darkstar. Again, I just have to marvel at the accuracy in the enemies, despite Rufus's hair bleaching, and both he and his sidekick have a lot more to hit us with in the remake. In both games the strategy should be the same to make the fight as simple as possible, and that is to ignore Rufus totally and focus all your attacks and moves on Darkstar between that and healing, because he can provide heals and barriers for Rufus, so not taking that out first really prolongs the battle and increases the difficulty. And it's probably a much tougher and longer battle overall in the remake, but once the dog is taken out in both games, it doesn't take too long after that to finish Rufus off. It's some nice kind of dual action scenes and attacks from the enemies there as well, I think. Once we've gotten Darkstar out of the way in the remake, Rufus pulls out his new move with these coins, and it's quite a powerful attack and it can create problems during the battle. And I imagine this was a very difficult fight on the hard level.
Let's make it a night to remember.
It's on for real now?
Yeah.
I was quite pleased to have won the battle in both games with the cross slash, which helped me to make that nice little segue between the two games again, showing how similar they are so often. And this leads into Rufus's escape, which again is recreated so accurately.
No, not quite.
For Shinra.
Whilst this is not the last we'll see of him in both games, the remake adds in a little helicopter attack on the way out, which allows the remake to also update Tifa's waiting on Cloud. In the original she's simply waiting at the foot of the stairs, but the remake offers her the chance to be the hero and save Cloud this time, and I feel this scene is kinda in here as maybe a little homage to a scene that's at the very end of the original game, but that's just my theory.
You gotta be better than this. If you're gonna play the hero.
In the original, as I said, Tifa's waiting downstairs and we rush to meet her. And another prime example of great scoring from Nobuo Uematsu with The boss fight music continuing to play, showing the urgency with which we've got to progress here. As Cloud meets with Tifa, I flick back here to show you what went on when Barret, Aerith and Red 13 left in between matters. In both games those three are sectioned off, but in the original you've got to be careful about the materia, as you can end up leaving this group with very little, which causes logistical problems later, as we'll see. It's not such an issue in the remake as the boss fight that they have coming up. It takes place very differently in the new game. In the original we head to the lifts, and upon entering we are thrown into a double fight, with us first facing the Arsenal, and then we do face another fight which is reminiscent of the Valkyrie that we saw in part 11 when we were ascending to the top of the plate. If you don't have any magic attached here, it can make the fight very difficult, as only Barret is able to attack from range with his gun, and only Red's limit break is the only other physical attack we can really make. I'd messed up in not applying the magic to them, so I'd used the assistance available on the PS4 version of the original. In the remake, it's of course a more cinematic affair, and the battle itself is reserved for the floor that this lift descends to.
Screw it. We gotta go back. What, Red?
Meanwhile, on our way out of here, we've actually discovered that Wedge is in the building and he's been helping Mayor Domino, and we then are faced with this scene that's coming up, which after we've seen to have Wedge miraculously saved twice earlier in the remake, seems to indicate that perhaps he's dying at the hands of the Spectres, and the dialogue certainly makes it seem this way.
I'm sorry, Cloud. Just tell me that I made a difference.
And given the lengths gone to save him so far, with another revelation at the end of the remake, I do wonder if he maybe will feature again.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Following a further cutscene, we finally get to engage the Arsenal in battle in the remake. And similar to Rufus, it's got some additional side foes and parts to get rid of first, which help us then destroy the main boss.
Okay, you asked for it, man. Open wide.
With the Arsenal being on the floor this time, of course everybody is free to attack, but of course remember that in this battle Red 13 is simply attacking on his own and is not controlled by the player at the moment.
I was born ready,
So you are effectively down to just two characters that you can control at this point. Now of course with this being a boss fight, it allows us the use of a summon here. I'm getting Shiva out. And something that I've not done as much of as I'd like so far in the remake and obtaining all the summons, but I do plan to revisit the game in the future and do just that and some other things. And there really is so much to do in the remake, and that can be both its strongest and weakest selling point at times. Some of the extensions added to bulk up the main story can be a bit laborious, but it has so much to keep players coming back to see what they've missed, or run it a different way, or see different cutscenes or outcomes to various situations, not to mention all the side quests available. For me though, at 40, I'd still probably just go back to the original game, mainly because that was my game at my time, and nostalgia is a tough thing to beat. But I think the appreciation of both games is probably absolutely dependent on age and when and how you first visited the franchise. But there can be no doubt of one thing though, and that's that Final Fantasy VII Remake looks absolutely amazing at all times. The cutscenes are beautiful, but I love how they are often merged seamlessly in and out of the standard gameplay and battles. Such is the magnificence of today's gaming.
Cloud and Tifa could be dead already.
Hell they are.
And we need to find a way we can all escape, and quickly.
You're right. Let's go.
So, despite Red's pessimism, we move on to a section which, in the original, blew my 16-year-old mind in 1997, where we head back to the reception area of Shinra HQ and we've got to find a way out. And in the remake it changes things up with us being blocked by some Shinra troops and Heidegger inside the building, and it gives us a nice scene for the breakout to take effect on. But we see the remake parallel of the self-descriptions that we saw on the roof in the original here.
We have them surrounded, sir.
Yes, I can see that. It was only a matter of time. Here we are. So then, what is this ragtag group of misfits I see before me? Avalanche!
Local florist.
Lab rat dog.
And where are the rest of you? Up here.
In the original though, we find our way blocked outside the building, but we face the same kind of dilemma. Now, in 1997, despite the initial scene of Aerith at the start of the game, I hadn't really seen much of the advertising, and so I was not in any way expecting the upturn in graphics that we were about to see. The music and everything had me going. I was eager to get out. When the music changed and the escape cutscene began, I was blown away. I'd never seen anything as brilliant on the PlayStation or anything else. Now I'm glad to say I'm at least able to show that cutscene, as I was worried it may also be retracted from being recorded like the end of the remake is. But I've got it in here. I've tried to splice it in accurately with the remake scenes, and you'll also see how well some of the scenes are paralleled.
Everyone, get in!
Let's go! Stop them, you fools! Don't let them escape!
Let's roll.
Why's he always gotta... Whoa! Whoa! Shit!
Now, as we charge towards the window, take this next scene coming up in as it is the last one we're going to see of Final Fantasy VII Remake in my series for now. Unfortunately, there's still a restriction in place on the recording of any footage from the final chapter, chapter 18 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's in order to try and avoid spoilers, etc, although I'm pretty sure there are now plenty of videos out there, so I'm not sure how effective that really is, but cut short what I'm able to show you for the moment. So I can really summarise the pertinent moments in the remake which we won't be able to see, that you wouldn't have seen in the original game. In both games we do have the bike chase, but something the remake had shown us earlier during the mission to help Jessie back home. But prior to this starting in the remake, we stopped to see that the spectres or the arbiters of fate have entirely surrounded and engulfed the Shinra Tower. Rufus and Sung are then seen within to be pondering what's going on, but neither they or our characters, when the action flicks to them, know what's going on, although I must say that when Aerith claims that she doesn't know, it does sound like a little bit of a lie. Now, the bike chase ultimately culminates in us reaching the end of the road and a boss battle with the motor ball. In the remake, the motor ball actually comes along in a similar fashion, but we then have to fight it in the same way that we do the bikes and also vans and drones in the remake. And that's just the beginning of the changes which I'll be referring to. The remake also gives us the option to actually skip the bike minigame altogether and move on to the end scenes. In the original we then fall into the by now familiar boss battle, signposted by both, in this case, a little intro scene and the standard boss music, of course. Not too difficult a boss if you've been engaging in many fights as possible thus far. Anyone who's been avoiding battles could face a longer fight, but generally still winnable easy enough. Victory in this fight brings us to a lovely little cutscene in a moment in the original game, as our heroes bid goodbye to Midgar and everything that they are personally leaving behind to go after Sephiroth. During this scene, when I first played Final Fantasy VII, I was just still blown away at just the mass expansion and the direction of where the game was going, and that so much still seemed to be coming after we'd already seen and done so much, and it really was showing to be a great experience. Now at this stage in the remake it really takes off into a different place, with an ending which has caused some controversy as far as I'm aware, and we see first of all a falling black feather which heralds Sephiroth's arrival once more. Aerith then states to him that he is wrong and just everything about him is just wrong. Sephiroth then seems to summon the spectres away from Shinra HQ and they converge on a kind of wall behind him, and this then prompts a vision for Cloud, and we go into a scene which isn't witnessed in the original game until much later, and it's a flashback of someone dressed like Cloud with the same sword but with black hair. Now, to those who don't know, this is Zack Fair, and it's Aerith's love interest that we've seen referred to previously in earlier videos. And initially these scenes show what we saw in the original, and that's Zack engaging with a large group of Shinra soldiers in a battle, but then the flashback ends and it comes out via Aerith instead, and it shows his connection to her also. Now these scenes were mirrored in the original, but not, as I said, until much later when the truth is being revealed. Sephiroth though in the remake then creates a portal through the middle of the wall of spectres, and he challenges us to follow him. Aerith states to the group that this is the point of no return and stops us briefly in order to check our resolve, allow us to kind of stock up and heal, etc. And she then refers to this moment as Destiny's Crossroads. After being asked, Aerith states that pushing through will mean terrifying freedom for us, perhaps referring to players being scared of potential new storylines. She then goes on to say that the words and the cries of the planet which impact her so heavily are not heard by Sephiroth, and she gives a rousing speech as to why Sephiroth is the threat that we're going to have to go after and stop. She then goes on to state that they will be changing more than fate, they will be changing themselves. It's confirmed numerous times by the characters that by proceeding we will be challenging destiny, and we also get to see a rousing farewell tune for Barret as he says goodbye to Marlene. We push through and we find that all of the spectres or wraiths, arbiters of fate, whatever, have converged into one gigantic being, a big massive arbiter of fate which we've got to face in battle via sort of 3 miniature arbiter of fate bosses, and a very sort of Kingdom Hearts-esque kind of end fight, and we've got to get past that to then go after Sephiroth. Now, most discussions of the game seem to point towards us changing the future of the original storyline, and I've got to admit there are a number of lines of dialogue which would seem to support this. I still hope though that it's maybe the original story progressing which Sephiroth is trying to prevent, and he's been shown to have control over the spectres, so I cling to the hope that we'll eventually follow the original plot. I know Zack is shown later to have survived the Shinra onslaught, but this could be maybe to allow a bigger backstory part with him in the second or third outings of the remake, and that would maybe explain his presence at the end of the Intergrade at Aerith Church as well. Who knows, maybe all will be changed and he and Aerith will survive. Who knows where it's going to lead. As we saw in the last scene from the remake, the Biggs has survived. Regardless though, it's been a beautiful, if somewhat drawn out ride in the remake so far, and I look forward to the next part. In the original, we simply shimmy down from the road above to outside the Midgar walls and discuss how we're going to proceed. With that being, on to the town of Calm, where the background of Sephiroth is first revealed to us by Cloud in a really amazing scene. After Cloud has been elected leader, much to Barret's dismay, we then split the party appropriately and head on out to the world map, which marks the end of the remake story and my series for now. If and when I get a PS5, I'll look to get back into the Intergrade, and assume part 2 will only be on the 5, and maybe if chapter 18 unlocks I can look to revisit this video. So what conclusions have I drawn from all this? Well, first off, the remake gives me everything I could have wanted to see, although perhaps not always in the style I expected to. Nearly every little detail from Final Fantasy VII, and I've noted a few of these throughout the series, is updated and represented in the remake in some fashion. The remake though does have its own story and universe to build now, and it seems everyone is still unsure exactly what this will mean when the latter parts of the remake are released. But to me, in its simplest form, I've got to take it back to one of the first things I said about the 2 games back in part 1 of the series, about the remake pulling back the screen of the original to reveal the truth underneath. The remake just takes what's in the original and expands it, sometimes massively and sometimes in different ways to how it was made initially. On average, time-wise, I would estimate that the remake has around at least 3 or 4 times as much playtime to be put into it, and this means, should that hold true, it could well take in excess of 120 hours of gameplay to complete the remake fully, and probably more. I do love how great the remake looks, and I love seeing my favourite game brought to such a realistic vision. However, it remains just that, my favourite game, despite how lovely the remake looks. I don't know what changes are coming, but I do hope that either the whole Arbiters of Fate thing actually means that while we would wish to fight some future plot lines, one especially, Fate has it in store that this cannot be changed. Yes, have expansions, change some of the ways we get from A to Z, but don't go messing about with the alphabet. All in though, while the remake looks amazing and probably contains maybe the full image of what the developers wanted to make in 1997, nothing from me personally will eclipse or come close to eclipsing what I feel is the greatest game ever made. I genuinely hope my series thus far on Final Fantasy VII and its remake has been entertaining. For the future, I'm sure we'll return to these when part 2 of the remake is released, but I'm also now gearing up to play for the first time Final Fantasy VIII, so I hope you can join me for some of these as live reaction videos in my planned new series WATSORB Plays. But for now, thank you for watching. Please like, share, subscribe and ring the notification bell, and cheers for now from WATSORB.